Welcome back to George on Sports. I am your host, George Egator, and today we are joined by none other than my good friend, ex-quarterback of the Kent Exiles, and now senior football development coordinator at the NFL, James Cook. How you going, man? How has it been? How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you again. Good to catch up.
No doubt, man. So obviously, I know some of your story. We played together at Kent Exiles for a number of years. I mean, you were my quarterback, and whereas I was playing running back, and we had a great number of years. But for people who don't know, and actually for myself too, how did you actually get into the sport? And when was your first introduction into American football?
So my introduction to the sport was probably similar to a lot of guys, right? Just came across it on TV. Didn't know what it was I was looking at, but I thought it looked pretty cool and wanted to find out more. So I think it was a college game I came across, found it. Then just watching the game became boring after a little while. So I had to try and find a team, found the Exiles weren't too far away from where I lived. And so I was about 12 years old at the time. So I was pretty lucky I got into it at an early age. I know a lot of people wish they got into it earlier. And then so when I was 13, I was able to kind of start training with the Exiles under 17 team, and then at 14, I started playing for their contact team, and did 10 years with them. So it was a kind of definitely a fan's introduction to the game, and I think an introduction that a lot of guys are familiar with. But never looked back. It's been a whirlwind since then.
Yeah, and I can personally vouch for when I obviously joined Kent. And then you took over from our quarterback, Zach Ritchie, and pretty much, took control of the ship from then on. And I could see the trajectory myself. I mean, again, right now you're in Arizona, if I'm not correct. You're in Arizona, where you're obviously taking part in a number of different roles with the NFL, and we'll talk about some of those in a moment. But one of the roles I know that you were involved in early on when you made your move out to the States is the NFL Academy. I know they're based, obviously, in London here, with strong links back to the NFL in the stateside. What was your involvement with the NFL Academy, and what was your experience whilst you were involved with those guys?
So I got on board with the NFL literally in the months prior to the academy kicking off for real. So I was kind of there right at the inception of it. And really the idea behind that program was born out of the success of the player pathway, and I'm sure we'll go into, but and just the belief that there are guys around the world that can play. And if we can find those guys younger and younger, then we're going to have more success with them when they translate to higher levels of competition. So my role with the academy, early days, it was just trying to make sure everything kind of was happening. Like, there was a lot of guys in London working really hard just to get it off the ground, and still continue to work really hard on it. And then increasingly my role has been more around exit pathways for our more talented athletes. So we want to start seeing more and more of those guys moving on to play at college football in various levels within the US. We had a quarterback, George Reynolds, who I've known for a number of years, who's now in Canada as well. So trying to get more traction with those guys in at higher levels of play, and really try and see if they can pick up the game and be ambassadors for us over in the States.
So as an older guy, I would say, and someone who picked up the sport quite late. So I picked up the sport when I was 18, as opposed to, you picked it up at 12. And the NFL Academy gives so many kids the opportunity. I believe it's 16 to 18-year-olds, if I'm not correct, to potentially, like you say, George is now in Canada, and I'm aware of a number of other guys who have, made it into JUCO, Div 1, even Div 2, receiving offers to go and play out in the States, which is essentially what the growth of the game is all about, really. And the NFL Academy is an amazing initiative, and I'm sure it was an honor for you to take part in that. And if we look further down the line, your progression has been quite steep, I would say. Obviously, you find yourself now as part of the NFL International Player Pathway Program. So people know a little bit about the program because you have names like FA, Christian Wade, who obviously was ex-England and Wasps rugby player who, had the famous touchdown in preseason with the Bills. But for people who don't necessarily know about the International Player Pathway Program, what can you tell people about how the program works and what it's all about?
So the International Player Pathway is about finding really talented athletes and football players from around the world that we think have the capability to play in the NFL, but they just need that little bit of extra support to kind of get situated in the league and to adjust to a higher level that they might not have been exposed to in their home countries. So FA, this thing's really built off of FA and like the success that he's had, and he's really paving the way. Like, FA was someone who had no background in organised sport whatsoever, played a handful of games for London Warriors back in the UK, and really just kind of showed a lot of athletic potential and somebody who had a very high performing mindset, very high motor. And effectively how the program works is that international players are allocated to NFL teams. So the division will be randomly selected a year. So that's 4 teams per year. An international player will be allocated to that team, where the team can carry them as an additional player on their practice squad. Now, that was kind of where the idea started, getting guys on practice squads and just getting them to learn and develop. But increasingly, the standard of what we expect from our players has changed. We've got, like you said, FA, he plays on Sundays now. He's not a practice squad guy. We have Jakob Johnson of Germany, who's in New England. He plays on Sunday, not a practice squad guy. Jordan Mailata just signed a 4-year, $64 million contract extension with the Philadelphia Eagles. And so the standard for international players is no longer practice squads, put it that way. So that's kind of where the idea of the program came about, and increasingly trying to get more and more guys playing on Sundays.
Yeah. And I mean, the Jordan deal you mentioned, that is a huge, huge contract. And it's a perfect example. I mean, FA is one too, but to see someone who has gone from almost no background of football to where they are now, I think it's proof that, you know, the international player program, is such a mouthful, works.
I know. IPP,
that's the one. IPP, there we go. So your role in the IPP, because I've seen myself on some of your social media, I mean, you were the quarterback at the Florida Gators Pro Day.
Yeah.
That in itself is a huge experience, and congratulations, by the way, because me watching you doing that, honestly, it was amazing. Seeing where we were on Beaverwood and playing quarterback on the turf. Yeah, man, it's amazing to see. What was that like?
So really, like, being able to throw a ball was one of the best things I ever did. So I kind of got introduced to this work through Adam Dirty and Will Bryce, who started the program. They were working guys out in London, and they do try and identify talent for the program back when it was in its very, very early days, and they needed an arm. Basically, they need someone who can come and just throw balls, and they can help evaluate them off of that. So I got introduced to them by doing that. It was just voluntary, but I was happy to do it. Then later down the line, when a job opportunity came up, they kept me in mind, and so I was able to get into it that way. But I've always been the arm kind of on the staff. So if we need a ball thrown, so I've done. Obviously, the Florida Pro Day last year was a lot of fun, so I threw for our athletes there at the University of Florida. But then the year before, we had a Pro Day cancelled because of COVID, and so we did a virtual one through at the Combine in London this last year as well, the International Combine. So being able to throw is kind of has helped us out, and it helps our athletes out. So I'll continue doing it. Just got to keep my arm in shape. But yeah, it's cool. Definitely being able to translate a former being able to play and then bring it forward into this role has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, from what I saw, listen, your arm hasn't missed a beat. Like, clearly, you're able to zip it down the field whenever you need to. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. So what is it like? Bearing in mind, the IPP brings in athletes from all different kinds of sporting backgrounds, basketball, rugby, which is a popular one because the skill set kind of transitions quite easily. Yep. What is it like working with athletes some who have a similar background in contact sport, and some who don't, and some who completely, I guess FA is one who has none. But what is it like to work with those kind of athletes and to see them flourish when it comes to the IPP program and beyond?
It's really rewarding, but also it makes you realize that sometimes those guys that just have a blank slate, they're just unmolded clay. You know, they have no bad habits. They have, like we sometimes say, no credit is better than bad credit. So guys who have like bad habits and perhaps have picked things up playing the sport around the world that they struggle to get out of, that's sometimes harder than starting with someone who's never played it before at all. So someone like Christian Wade, for example, he comes in and yes, he's got professional. He knows how to be a professional. He knows how to look after his body, how to handle himself in the team environment. All those boxes are ticked, but you just have to teach him the game, and it's fun, and it makes you realize how much there is to learn in a game like this. You know, you go right back to the basics, and suddenly it dawns on you how much there is to learn. But the guys take it on, and you learn a lot about the characters when they're faced with such an uphill battle like that. But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of enjoyment that comes from starting with some really incredible talent, physical talent, but just a blank slate.
And what would you say you have learned about yourself from your sharp trajectory and where you are now? And again, I continue to say it's really amazing to see, and I love seeing every move that you make. What is it like to reflect on your journey, to see where you started and where you are now? How does that feel?
Yeah, it's been a whirlwind. I think coming from, to sort of at that point now, I'm very much transitioning away from being a player and more into this kind of like more of a leadership role with the players, is that I think I anticipate being a much better teacher than I ever was as a player, which is exciting. I think the best ahead of me, certainly. I think I do really enjoy getting that kind of secondhand enjoyment out of the players doing well. You know, we had Samis Reyes for last year, for example, who's now in Washington, tight end from Chile. And I lived in the same house as him for 3 months. We'd work out every day. I'd throw balls to him every day. We'd sit and we'd play Madden together because he had to learn the rules. Like, he didn't understand like what hash marks were. Like, we'd do all of that stuff.
Wow.
And then this past season, watching him play on Sundays, and actually he's playing in the NFL and he's out there, and you get a lot from that. You really do. And so I think if I can continue doing that for a very long time, I'll be very happy.
So your role, we mentioned it at the top of the show, Senior Football Development Coordinator. Mm-hmm. If you could sum that up in a nutshell, how would you sum up that role?
So working on football development initiatives in NFL International is all about how do we grow the game? How do we grow participation in the game? Mentioned the academy, for example. That's really kind of a youth focus. And then you've got the IPP, which is all about local role models, local heroes, we call them. You know, so FA is doing his thing, and you see all these younger guys back home in the UK who are being inspired by that. That's what we're trying to do. That's the bottom line. So it's all about increasing participation and really proving that the best athletes in the world, it doesn't matter where they're from, deserve to play in the NFL, and the NFL deserves to have them as well. And so it's all about getting people to play the game, growing the game. And really proving that, there are athletes in some strange corners of the world that would look good in an NFL uniform.
Absolutely, without a doubt. And I mean, we obviously had some news recently about the new international games that are going to be played. We have 2 back at the Tottenham Stadium. We have 1 at Wembley, the return to Wembley, which I know is a fan favourite. You've got the tailgate and everything going on over there. We've also got the announcement of the games in Germany, as well as the return of, I think, the Cardinals will be in Mexico. Now, the growth of the game is real. I believe, if I'm not incorrect, American football in the UK is one of the top 3 fastest growing sports. And with schemes like the academy, IPP, it seems like it's only going to go up from here. So initially I was thinking along the lines of having a franchise over here. Personally, I don't necessarily think it's going to happen, but in terms of the trajectory of the sport, where do you see it going? How far do you think it can go?
I think a lot of people kind of working in this space and who have high ambitions and high hopes for the sport and the growth of sport, hopefully we're trying to make it mainstream. And kind of, you've got a kid growing up in London, you've got a kid growing up in Paris, in Dusseldorf, and they're thinking they want to play American football, and they're thinking that from an early age, because why wouldn't they? They're surrounded by it, they have access to it. And that's something that you and me have certainly experienced, is just not having that same access to the sport. Like you said, you getting into it at age 18, like you wish you could have got into it when you were much, much younger. Yeah. And so really that's kind of what we picture when we think of this perfect image of where this is all going. Is kids picking up a ball much, much earlier and able to really contribute as players, but then everything else that comes with it, you know, more coaches, scouting, it's a big world, the NFL, and there's a lot of roles and things that people do. And so we just want to bring football to more people, ultimately.
So James, before I do let you go, obviously the IPP, it's an amazing program, as well as the NFL Academy, and it continues to do good for people from all around the world and all different walks of life. Where do you think, in terms of yourself as well, what do you see as being next on the agenda for you? Like, what is your trajectory like? What are you looking to do moving forward? Number one. In fact, no, go ahead. What do you think? Where would you say your personal trajectory is aiming towards?
I'll be honest, it's a bit of a cheap answer, but I'm trying to take care of the next day. Really just trying to focus on what's in front of me. You know, I always think to myself, the job I'm doing right now didn't exist 5 years ago. So who's to say what I'm doing in 5 years doesn't exist now? So I think just keep my head down. Trying to do what we're doing right now as best we can. Keep trying to push boundaries and do things differently and bigger, and set different expectations. You know, you look at what Jordan did this past year with his contract extension, and we're also proud of him, obviously, but he's pushing boundaries and he's proving what can be done. So if we continue to do that, that's what I'm trying to do. But yeah, I think sky's the limit for me personally. Like, definitely want to stay around athletes, stay around the game, give back to the international community as much as I can, and we'll see where that takes me.
And for the athletes out there that are looking at the IPP and wanting to, replicate the likes of FA and Christian Wade, what is one of your top tips that you would say for anybody who's potentially trying to make the IPP or trying to break into the NFL? What pieces of advice would you give to those athletes watching?
I think just asking for help, finding people that can help you, finding people that asking questions, like you don't know what you don't know. And quite often we'll work with players who think they've got it figured out. They think that they know football, and then they get exposed to this world and they realize that they really don't know anything about football. So I think making most of the resources that you have around you, and if you don't feel like you have those resources, really trying to reach out to that wider community around you, and try and work on yourself, and just always be open to growth and be open to what you don't know. Because I've certainly realized that, I thought I was a football junkie before I got this job, and now I'm exposed to people like that I really look up to. Will Bryce I work with, who's been a great mentor for me, as well as Adam Dirty. Spent a lot of time with him and what he's doing in Dallas right now with the Cowboys. So there's always more to learn. That's what I'd say.
James, it's been an absolute pleasure. I won't keep you because I know you've got a busy schedule, but I really appreciate you taking the time out to come and speak with me today. And no doubt so many people are going to find so many gems from this conversation. Again, thank you. I'm sure I'm going to see you soon enough, some point somewhere in London. But until then, it's been a pleasure.
No worries, George. Thanks for having me.